I poisoned 17 people at the finest wedding Mississippi ever saw. My name is Celia Washington. I'm 34 years old, and I served death on silver platters while they toasted to love and prosperity. They called me the best cook in 3 counties, said my hands were blessed, that my food could make angels weep. And they were right. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand as they raised their crystal glasses and laughed in their silk gowns, was that those same hands had pulled 3 small bodies from the ashes just 6 months before. Thomas was 8, Mary was 6, little David had just turned 4, and Addison Riverside, the groom's brother, had locked them in that barn and set it ablaze because he thought it was funny to teach slave children about hell. You're probably thinking I'm a monster. Maybe you're right. But before you judge me, before you turn away from this story, I need you to understand something. There are worse things than poison, worse things than death. There's living in a world where your children burn and their killer drinks champagne. There's smiling while you serve breakfast to the man who murdered everything you loved. There's the special kind of madness that comes from being invisible, from being trusted completely because they never saw you as human enough to be dangerous. What I did that night wasn't just murder. It was the only trial those people would ever face, the only judgment, the only justice in a world built on our backs and watered with our blood. Riverside Plantation sat like a white jewel along the Mississippi, its columns gleaming in the brutal summer sun. The main house smelled of magnolia and money, furniture polished until you could see your reflection, floors that clicked under the ladies' shoes. But my world was different. The kitchen house stood 50 yards back, separated by a garden of herbs I tended before dawn. Inside those brick walls, the air was thick with wood smoke and rendered fat with cinnamon and sweat. The heat was ungodly, a cast-iron stove burning from 4 in the morning until midnight, flames that made the whole room shimmer like looking through water. My sleeping quarters were above the kitchen, a loft where the temperature never dropped below 90 degrees. Even in winter, the smell of smoke lived in my hair, my clothes, my skin. My day started in darkness and ended the same way. 3:30 in the morning, I'd be lighting the stove, kneading dough for the breakfast biscuits. By 5, the first pots would be bubbling. Grits, coffee, bacon sizzling in its own fat. The Riversides expected breakfast at 7 sharp. Eggs cooked exactly 2 minutes. Toast golden but not burned. Jam from their own strawberries. Then came the cleaning, the prep work for dinner, the endless demands. Celia, the Colonel wants his chicken fried just so. Celia, make that peach cobbler like you did for the governor. I was excellent at my work. Had to be. Excellence was the only thing keeping my family together. Samuel worked the fields, but our children stayed close to the house because I was indispensable. Or so I thought. Even before that day, before everything turned to ash and blood, I carried a rage that had no name. I'd watch Addison Riverside stumble drunk through the kitchen at noon, grabbing at the young girls, breaking things just to watch us scramble. I'd see Mrs. Riverside sell off children at the dinner table, casual as discussing the weather, separating mothers from babies while I served her tea. The Colonel would lecture about Christian duty while his overseer left men hanging in the sun for looking him in the eye. And I had to smile, had to say, "Yes, ma'am," and "Right away, sir," while my teeth ground together so hard I'd taste blood. I told myself it was temporary, Told myself that excellence would protect us, that if I made myself valuable enough, invisible enough, essential enough, they'd leave my family alone. I was a fool. It was a Tuesday in March when my world ended. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, roast duck with cherry sauce for the Colonel's birthday. Through the window I could hear the children playing near the old tobacco barn, their laughter cutting through the afternoon heat. Then I heard Addison's voice, slurred and mean. "Y'all want to play a game?" he called out. "Let's play master and slave. You run, I'll catch you." I should have dropped everything and run to them, but Mrs. Riverside was standing right there demanding I fix her tea. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes of steeping her Earl Grey while my children screamed. The smoke came first, black and oily rising above the trees. Then the smell. God help me. I knew that smell before I even started running. Samuel reached the barn before I did. He was clawing at the door, his hands already bleeding, screaming their names. The padlock was still hot from the flames inside. Addison stood 20 feet away, swaying drunk, his face pale. It was just a game, he kept saying, just teaching them a lesson about running away. I didn't think the overseer arrived with keys, but by then the roof was falling in. They pulled Samuel back while he fought like a wild animal. I didn't fight. I stood there watching the barn collapse, watching everything I loved turn to smoke and cinders. And something inside me went very quiet, very still, very cold. The screaming woman they had to drag away was just a shell. The real Celia, the one who loved and hoped and believed, died in that fire with my babies. They pulled 3 small bodies from the wreckage that evening. Thomas, Mary, and David, reduced to charred remains I could barely recognize. The Colonel called it a tragic accident, said Addison had been drinking, didn't know the children were playing in the barn, didn't mean any harm. They buried my children in the slave cemetery that Sunday. No headstones, just wooden crosses that would rot within a year. Addison stayed in his room for a week, then emerged at Sunday dinner like nothing had happened. Mrs. Riverside patted my hand and said, "God works in mysterious ways." They expected me back in the kitchen by Monday, expected me to serve them breakfast, to smile, to go on like my heart wasn't a smoking crater. And I did. I went back to that kitchen. But the woman who returned wasn't their loyal Celia anymore. She was something else entirely. The first obstacle was my own hands. They shook for weeks after the funeral, trembling so badly I could barely hold a knife. Mrs. Riverside noticed, of course. "Celia, you're making a mess of that pastry," she'd say, her voice sharp with irritation. "I understand you're grieving, but we have standards to maintain." Standards. The word made something twist in my chest. I started sneaking to Mama Ruth's old cabin in the dead of night. The ancient woman who taught me to cook had also taught me the old knowledge, the plant wisdom passed down from Africa. She'd been dead 2 years, but her dried herbs still hung from the rafters. Monk's hood, oleander, white snake root, foxglove. Names that sounded like poetry, but whispered of power. The Colonel's hunting dogs found me there one night, their barking bringing the overseer running. "Just looking for herbs for the kitchen," I explained, my heart hammering. He believed me. They always believed me. Have you ever smiled at someone you wanted to kill? Ever said good morning to the person who murdered your children and felt your soul crack a little more? I did it every single day for months. And here's what I need you to understand. I wasn't born a killer. I was born a mother, a wife, a woman who believed in mercy and grace. But mercy is a luxury only the powerful can afford. If this touches your heart, if you've ever felt powerless while evil walked free, comment below and tell me where you're from. Subscribe if you want to hear the rest. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories, helps put food on my table, and lets me honor the truth that history tried to bury. Would you have done what I did? Could you have served breakfast to your children's killer and kept breathing? The second obstacle came in the form of Pearl Riverside's engagement announcement. The Colonel's daughter was marrying William Thompson, heir to the second largest plantation in Mississippi. The wedding would be in 6 months, September, when the heat finally broke. It would be the social event of the season, with guests from as far as Charleston and New Orleans. And Mrs. Riverside made it very clear Celia would create a feast worthy of legend. 75 guests, 7 courses. Her exact words were, "This is your chance to show the whole South what you're capable of." She had no idea how right she was. But with opportunity came scrutiny. Mrs. Riverside suddenly took interest in my shopping lists, my ingredient requests. Why so much salt, Celia? Why 3 kinds of mushrooms? I had to be careful, had to plan like a general preparing for war. Then nature itself seemed to turn against me. July brought a drought that killed half my herb garden. The plants I needed most, the ones growing in the shadowy places, the ones Mama Ruth had cultivated for purposes the Colonel would never understand, they withered in the brutal sun. I spent nights carrying water from the river, bucket after bucket, my back screaming. Samuel watched me with haunted eyes. He knew something had changed in me, but he was too broken to ask. The overseer grew suspicious of my midnight garden work. The dogs followed me. The moon seemed to hide behind clouds whenever I needed its light. And worst of all, Addison announced he'd be the best man. Standing at his brother-in-law's side, I'd have to look at him across that wedding feast. Had to keep my hands steady while serving the man who'd burned my babies alive. My breaking point came in August, 2 months before the wedding. I was preparing dinner when I heard Addison laughing in the dining room, telling the story like it was a joke. "Remember when those Panini children got locked in the barn?" he said, his voice carrying through the walls. "Lord, you should have seen them run before I—" He stopped, probably remembered I was in earshot. The kitchen knife was in my hand. 10 steps to the dining room. I could feel my feet moving, feel the rage burning through my veins like poison. Then Samuel's hand caught my wrist. He'd come in through the back door, saw the murder in my eyes. "Not like this," he whispered. "Not where they'll hang you in front of everyone." He was right, but in that moment, I realized something terrible and liberating. I'd already decided to die. The only question was how many of them I'd take with me. The revelation came while I was scrubbing the Colonel's study floors. He and Mr. Thompson were drinking bourbon, talking about the wedding, and they thought I was deaf as furniture. "Your Pearl's marrying into a fine family," the Colonel said. "The Thompsons know how to handle their property." Thompson laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "We had a similar incident last year. Fieldhand's boy got uppity, started teaching himself to read. My son Clayton handled it permanently. These things happen." The Colonel agreed. Said Addison had done the right thing, teaching those children their place. Can't let them forget who's in charge. He said, even if it means making examples. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about Addison. It was all of them. Every single person coming to that wedding had blood on their hands. The Thompsons, the Harrisons, the Beaumonts. They were a pack of wolves dressed in silk. That night, I found Mama Ruth's journal hidden in the cabin's chimney, pages wrapped in oilcloth, protected from time and moisture. Her handwriting was careful, precise, recording 50 years of knowledge. But it wasn't recipes I found. It was justice. She documented every poisoning going back to her grandmother's time in Santo Domingo, the slave uprising, the plantation owners who died in agony at their own dinner tables. Each entry noted the plant, the dose, the effect, and, crucially, the delay time. Some toxins worked in minutes, others took hours, letting the poisoner escape. She'd written, "They think we only know how to serve. They don't understand that the cook holds life and death in her hands every single day. We choose to let them live until we don't." I finally understood my power, and I understood exactly how to use it. I spent 3 nights without sleep, wrestling with what I was about to become. The choices were brutal and simple. I could do nothing, let my children's murder fade into the footnotes of history, smile and cook and die eventually as property. I could try to run, take Samuel and disappear into the north, spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, knowing those men would hunt us for sport. Or I could do what every fibre of my being screamed for: make them pay. But payment meant damnation. It meant crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'd be killing people who'd never even met my children, wives, daughters, people whose only crime was being born into that world and the innocent children attending the wedding. How could I look at them and see anything but Thomas, Mary, and David? I made my choice on a Sunday, kneeling in the slave chapel while the preacher talked about forgiveness. Forgiveness. The word tasted like ash. God had already made his choice when he let my babies burn. He'd chosen the powerful over the powerless, same as he always did, so I'd make my own justice. I decided I was already dead. The woman who loved mercy had died in that fire. What remained was just a weapon, an instrument of reckoning. I wouldn't be Celia Washington anymore. I'd be the answer to every prayer that never got answered, every scream that no one heard. If that made me a monster, then so be it. Monsters at least were honest about what they were. They didn't dress up murder in silk and call it civilization. September the 23rd, 1849. The wedding day dawned clear and merciless. I'd been cooking for 3 days straight, the kitchen a cathedral of steam and spice. For the children at the reception, I prepared a sweet milk pudding laced with valerian and chamomile, enough to make them sleep through what was coming. For the adults, I crafted 7 courses of exquisite death. The oyster appetizers for the Beaumonts carried white snake root. Their overseer had whipped Samuel until his back was hamburger. The venison for the Harrisons held foxglove. They'd sold a mother away from her infant last spring. The wedding cake, my masterpiece, was for everyone. Layers of almond cream and belladonna, ratios calculated to the ounce. But Addison's plate was special. Monk's hood in his wine, hemlock in his soup, nightshade in his duck. I wanted him awake, aware, watching everyone fall while paralysis crept through his limbs. The first guest collapsed during the toast. Mrs. Beaumont clutching her throat, eyes wide with confusion. Then Mr. Harrison, convulsing beside the punch bowl. The children slept peacefully in the next room, while chaos erupted. Screams, overturned chairs, someone shouting for a doctor. I watched from the kitchen doorway as 17 people fought for air that wouldn't come. Addison saw me. Our eyes met across that elegant disaster, and in his face I saw the exact moment he understood. His mouth worked soundlessly, trying to form words, while the poison locked his muscles. I walked to him, knelt down close, and whispered, "Their names were Thomas, Mary, and David. Remember those names in hell." By midnight, the house was silent, except for sobbing servants and the Colonel's rasping death rattle. I'd served justice on porcelain plates, and not one of them would wake to see morning. I disappeared that night, walking into the darkness with nothing but Mama Ruth's journal and the clothes on my back. Samuel had already run. I'd told him to go days before, gave him what little money I'd hidden. They never found me. The story became legend in the quarters, whispered around fires for generations. The cook who poisoned the finest wedding Mississippi ever saw. Some called me a devil. Others called me a saint. I don't care which. What I learned that night is this: they built their world on our suffering and called it God's will. They took our children, our bodies, our lives, and expected gratitude for the cruelty. But power isn't just in the whip and the chain. It's in the hands that prepare the food, in the knowledge they thought too dangerous for us to hold. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking you to understand that sometimes the only choice left is between dying silent or dying loud. I chose loud. And somewhere in the dark, in the places where the forgotten go, my children can rest, knowing their mother didn't bow. She burned the whole house.